Dr. Rebecca Martinez stared at the data screen in complete silence. The numbers made no sense. According to every scientific model she knew, the readings from planet Kepler 442c were impossible. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked again. The data remained the same. "Computer, run the analysis again," she said to the ship's artificial intelligence. "Analysis complete. Results unchanged, Dr. Martinez," came the calm reply. Rebecca leaned back in her chair aboard the research vessel Nexus Prime. As the lead xenobiologist for the Galactic Research Council, she had studied predator behavior on over 50 different worlds. Never had she seen anything like this. The distress signal from Kepler 442c had arrived 3 days ago. The human colony called New Haven was requesting immediate assistance, not because they were being attacked by the planet's dangerous wildlife, but because something strange was happening that they could not explain. "Dr. Martinez to the bridge," Captain Torres announced over the ship's communication system. "We're approaching Kepler 442c now." Rebecca gathered her research materials and headed to the bridge. The massive view screen showed a blue and green world that looked peaceful from space. But she knew that beneath those calm clouds lived some of the most dangerous predators in this sector of the galaxy. "Take us into orbit, Captain," Rebecca said. "I want full scans of the surface before we make contact with the colonists." Her research team gathered around the scanning stations. Dr. Veltar, a tall reptilian scientist from the Andorian Republic, operated the biological sensors. His scaled hands moved quickly across the controls as data flowed across his screen. "Remarkable," Veltar hissed in his native accent. "The shadow maws are not behaving like typical apex predators. They appear to be protecting the human settlements." Dr. Elena Kowalski, the team's behavioral specialist, looked up from her workstation. "That cannot be correct. Apex predators do not protect other species unless there is a clear benefit. What could they possibly gain from humans?" Rebecca studied the scan results. The shadow maws were massive wolf-like creatures, each one weighing over 400 pounds and standing 8 feet tall at the shoulder. They had evolved as the top predator on Kepler 442c, with powerful jaws that could crush metal and speed that allowed them to outrun most vehicles. According to the scans, dozens of these creatures had positioned themselves in a protective circle around the human colony. They were not hunting the humans. They were guarding them. "Captain, open a channel to the colony," Rebecca ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a weathered man in his 50s wearing colonial work clothes. His face showed stress but not fear. "This is Captain Jake Thompson, acting commander of New Haven Colony. Thank you for responding to our signal, Nexus Prime." "Captain Thompson, this is Dr. Rebecca Martinez. We received your distress call, but your message was unclear about the nature of your emergency. Our scans show shadow maws surrounding your colony, yet you appear to be unharmed." Jake ran a hand through his graying hair. "That's exactly the problem, Dr. Martinez. These creatures showed up about 6 weeks after we established the colony. At first we thought they were preparing to attack us. We went into full defensive mode, ready to fight for our lives. But they never attacked," Rebecca said, already knowing the answer from her scans. "Not only did they not attack, but they started protecting us. When the smaller predators come near our settlement, the shadow maws drive them away. They bring us food sometimes, leaving dead animals at our gates. Yesterday, one of them carried an injured colonist back to our medical center after he fell into a ravine during a survey mission." Dr. Veltar's reptilian eyes widened. "Impossible. No apex predator exhibits such behavior toward other species. There must be some mistake in your observations." Jake's expression hardened. "I've been working with dangerous animals for 20 years before coming to this colony. I know predator behavior when I see it. These creatures are protecting us, and I have no idea why." Rebecca made her decision. "Captain Thompson, we're sending down a research team to study this phenomenon. We'll establish a temporary research station near your colony with your permission." "You're more than welcome, Dr. Martinez. Maybe you can figure out what we cannot." 2 hours later, Rebecca stood on the surface of Kepler 442c for the first time. The air was clean and fresh, with a slight metallic taste that indicated high mineral content. The colony of New Haven spread out before her, a collection of prefabricated buildings and agricultural domes that housed nearly 200 human settlers. But what caught her attention were the shadow maws. 3 of the massive creatures sat on a hill overlooking the colony. Their dark fur rippled in the afternoon breeze, and their intelligent yellow eyes watched everything with careful attention. They showed no aggression toward the research team, but they clearly remained alert. "They're beautiful," whispered Dr. Sarah Chen, the team's junior researcher who had joined them from Earth. "I never expected them to be so magnificent." "Beautiful and deadly," Dr. Kowalski reminded her. "Do not forget that these creatures could kill any one of us in seconds if they chose to do so." Emma Rodriguez approached their group. She was a former military medic who now served as the colony's chief medical officer. Her calm demeanor suggested someone used to dealing with dangerous situations. "Dr. Martinez, I assume. Welcome to New Haven. I hope you can help us understand what's happening here because it goes against everything I learned about predator behavior during my military service." "Tell me what you've observed, Ms. Rodriguez," Rebecca said, taking out her recording device. "The shadow maws arrived about 2 months ago. At first we saw them watching us from a distance. Then they started getting closer. We prepared for attacks that never came. Instead, they began bringing us gifts." "Gifts?" "Dead animals, mostly. Species we hadn't seen before that turned out to be excellent sources of protein. They leave them at specific locations around our perimeter. Our nutritionist analyzed the meat and found it was perfectly safe for human consumption." Dr. Veltar shook his head. "Gift-giving behavior is extremely rare among predator species. It typically occurs only between mated pairs or parents and offspring." Emma smiled. "That's not all. Watch this." She walked toward the nearest shadow maw, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. The massive creature watched her approach but showed no signs of aggression. When she was about 10 feet away, the shadow maw made a low rumbling sound that resembled a purr more than a growl. Emma reached into her medical bag and pulled out a small device that she placed on the ground before backing away. The shadow maw approached the device, sniffed it carefully, then picked it up gently in its massive jaws and carried it back to Emma. It dropped the device at her feet and sat back as if waiting for approval. "It's a simple fetch game," Emma explained. "But this creature weighs 400 pounds and has jaws that could crush my skull, yet it's playing with me like a domesticated animal." Rebecca stared in amazement. In all her years of studying alien predators, she had never seen anything like this. The implications were staggering. If apex predators could form cooperative relationships with humans, it would change everything they knew about interspecies interaction. "We need to document everything," she said to her team. "Full behavioral studies, environmental analysis, and genetic sampling if possible. Whatever is happening here, it's the most important discovery in xenobiology in decades." As the sun began to set over New Haven Colony, more shadow maws emerged from the surrounding forests. Rebecca counted at least 12 of the massive creatures taking positions around the human settlement. They moved with purpose and intelligence, each one taking a specific location as if following a predetermined plan. Dr. Martinez, Jake Thompson, called from the colony's main building. "You might want to see this. Our motion sensors are picking up movement in the forest. Something's coming toward the colony and it's not friendly." Rebecca and her team hurried to the colony's command center. The sensor display showed multiple contacts approaching from the east, moving fast and low to the ground. "Razor claws," Emma said grimly. "They're pack hunters about the size of large dogs but with claws that can cut through metal. They usually hunt at night." On the display, Rebecca watched as the razor claw pack approached the colony's perimeter. But before they could reach the human buildings, the shadow maws moved into action. The massive creatures formed a defensive line between the approaching predators and the colony. They did not roar or make threatening displays. They simply stood, their ground, their presence alone enough to make the razor claws reconsider their attack. After several tense minutes, the smaller predators turned and disappeared back into the forest. The shadow maws maintained their positions for another hour before returning to their usual watching posts. "This is incredible," Rebecca whispered. "They're not just protecting you randomly. They have organized defense patterns and coordinated responses. This suggests a level of intelligence and planning that we never suspected. As the research team prepared to set up their equipment for long-term study, Rebecca realized they were witnessing something that would change how the galaxy understood the relationship between different species. The question was no longer whether the Shadow Maws were protecting the humans. The question was why. Dr. Rebecca Martinez woke before dawn to the sound of Shadow Maws communicating with each other. The deep, rumbling calls echoed across the valley, where New Haven Colony sat nestled between rolling hills. She had been on Kepler 442c for 3 days now, and each morning brought new surprises. She dressed quickly and stepped outside the research station her team had built near the colony's edge. The morning air was cool and fresh. In the distance, she could see several Shadow Maws moving through the tall grass with purpose and coordination. "You're up early," came a voice behind her. Rebecca turned to see Emma Rodriguez approaching with 2 cups of coffee. The colony's medical officer had become her unofficial guide to understanding the strange relationship between humans and Shadow Maws. "I wanted to observe their morning routines," Rebecca said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Yesterday I noticed they seemed to follow specific patterns." Emma nodded. "That's what made me think they might see us as family somehow. Watch the big male on the hill there." Rebecca followed Emma's gaze to where a massive Shadow Maw sat watching the colony. This one was larger than the others, with scars across his dark fur that spoke of many battles survived. "We call him Alpha," Emma continued. "He's been here since the beginning. Every morning he does the same thing. He checks each section of the colony perimeter, counts the humans he can see, and then assigns other Shadow Maws to specific areas." As if to prove Emma's words, Alpha stood and made a series of low calls. 3 smaller Shadow Maws emerged from different directions and approached him. Alpha made different sounds to each one, and they dispersed to take positions around the colony. "It's like he's giving them orders," Rebecca said in amazement. "That's exactly what I think he's doing." But here's the strange part. Watch what happens when Mrs. Peterson comes out to tend her garden. An elderly woman emerged from one of the residential buildings, carrying a watering can and moving slowly due to age. Immediately, a young Shadow Maw that had been resting near the agricultural dome stood up and trotted over to walk alongside her. "His name is Shadow," Emma explained. "He's adopted Mrs. Peterson as his personal responsibility. When she works in the garden, he lies down nearby and watches for any threats. When she goes inside, he returns to his usual post." Rebecca watched in fascination as the massive predator walked carefully beside the elderly woman, matching her, slow pace perfectly. When Mrs. Peterson stopped to water her plants, Shadow sat down and waited patiently. "This behavior goes against everything we know about apex predators," Rebecca murmured, making notes on her recording device. Dr. Veltar approached them, his reptilian features showing confusion. "Dr. Martinez, I have completed the night vision analysis of Shadow Maw patrol patterns. The results are disturbing." "Disturbing how?" "They have established a defensive perimeter with overlapping fields of observation. Each animal covers a specific sector, and they rotate positions every 4 hours. This is military-level tactical planning." Dr. Elena Kowalski joined their group, carrying her behavioral analysis equipment. "I have something even stranger to report. I recorded their vocalizations all night. They appear to have developed specific calls for individual humans." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Specific calls?" "Each human in the colony has a unique sound that the Shadow Maws use to identify them. Listen to this." Kowalski activated her recording device. A series of different Shadow Maw calls played back. Some were higher, pitched, others lower. Some were short barks, others longer howls. This first call is what they use when referring to Captain Thompson. This second one is for Emma. The third is for Mrs. Peterson. They have names for all of you. Emma stared at the device. "They've named us? Like we name pets or children?" "More than that," Kowalski continued. "Young Shadow Maws are learning these names from adults. I observed training sessions where adult creatures teach cubs the specific calls for different humans." Michael Davis, the colony's linguist, approached their gathering with excitement written across his face. "Dr. Martinez, you need to hear this. I've been analyzing their communication patterns. And I think I'm beginning to understand their language. Structure. They have language structure? Basic, but yes. Subject, action, object. When Alpha assigns patrol duties, he uses specific sound combinations that indicate location, time, and responsibility. When they call about humans, they use our individual names combined with status indicators. Michael activated his own recording device. This call means small human, safe, garden area. This one means pack leader human, building, needs watching. They're not just making random noises. They're talking about us. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been quietly documenting Shadowmaw behavior, spoke up. I think I know why they're protecting us. Everyone turned to look at the young researcher. Yesterday I watched a female Shadowmaw with her cubs. The way she moved around them, the way she positioned herself between them and any potential threat, the gentle sound she made to comfort them. It's identical to how they behave around us. You think they see us as they're young? Rebecca asked. Not exactly. I think they see us as family members who need protection. We're smaller than them, we're not as fast or strong, and we don't have natural weapons. To a protective species, we would appear vulnerable. Emma nodded slowly. That would explain the gift-giving behavior. Parent animals bring food to their offspring. Pack animals share resources with family members. Their discussion was interrupted by a commotion near the colony's main gate. Captain Thompson was arguing with someone over the communication system. I don't care what your regulations say, Thompson was saying. Those creatures are not a threat to this colony. Rebecca and her team hurried to the command center. Thompson looked frustrated as he ended his communication. Problem, Captain? Rebecca asked. The Colonial Authority wants to send a military unit to remove the Shadowmaws. They think we're being held hostage by dangerous predators. Dr. Veltar's scales changed color slightly, indicating surprise. That would be catastrophic. If the Shadowmaws perceive armed humans as a threat to their adopted family, the results could be violent. We need more time to study the situation, Rebecca said. Can you delay the military response? I can try, but they're concerned about colonist safety. From their perspective, we're living surrounded by apex predators that could turn on us at any moment. Emma shook her head. They don't understand. These creatures aren't just protecting us randomly. They've integrated us into their social structure. We're part of their pack now. A loud alarm suddenly echoed across the colony. The perimeter sensors had detected movement in the forest. Everyone rushed outside to see what was happening. Dozens of smaller predators were emerging from the tree line. Razor claws, but more than Rebecca had seen before. They moved in coordinated groups, suggesting pack hunting behavior. How many? Thompson asked. Sensors show at least 60 contacts, came the reply from the command center. The colonists began moving toward the emergency shelters, but the Shadowmaws were already responding. Alpha let out a long, complex call that echoed across the valley. From every direction, Shadowmaws appeared and began forming defensive lines. But something different happened this time. Instead of just positioning themselves between the threats and the human building, several Shadowmaws moved to protect the research station where Rebecca's team had their equipment. They're protecting us too, Dr. Kowalski said in wonder. We're not even colonists, but they've included us in their protection. The Razor Claws approached in waves, testing the Shadowmaw defenses. But the larger predators had developed new tactics. They worked in coordinated teams, with some Shadowmaws driving the attackers toward positions where others waited in ambush. Remarkable, Veltar hissed. They have developed battlefield coordination specifically for defending this location. Young Michael Davis pointed toward the colony's school building. Look there. A female Shadowmaw had positioned herself directly in front of the building where the colony's children spent their days. Two smaller Shadowmaws flanked her, creating an impenetrable barrier. She's protecting the young humans specifically, Sarah Chen observed, just like she would protect her own cubs. The battle was brief, but decisive. The Shadowmaw's superior size, coordination, and defensive positioning drove off the Razor Claws without a single casualty among the defenders. As the smaller predators retreated into the forest, Alpha made another series of calls. The other Shadowmaws began returning to their regular positions, but not before several of them approached the humans to check for injuries. Shadow trotted over to Mrs. Peterson, who had remained outside despite the danger. The massive predator gently nudged her with his nose as if confirming she was unharmed. We're not just being protected, Rebecca realized aloud. We're being adopted. They've made us part of their family structure, and they'll defend us just as fiercely as they defend their own young. Emma smiled. The question now is what happens when the colonial authority arrives with weapons and soldiers? Will the Shadow Maws understand that those humans are trying to help us, or will they see them as threats to their adopted family? Rebecca looked at the massive predators taking their positions around the colony. Each one was capable of incredible violence, yet they showed nothing but gentleness toward the humans they had chosen to protect. Dr. Jennifer Walsh arrived on Kepler 442c with 3 crates of equipment and a reputation for solving impossible evolutionary puzzles. As the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies relationships, she had been called in to explain why apex predators were treating humans like family members. Rebecca Martinez met her at the landing pad as the transport ship departed. Walsh was a tall woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to analyze everything around her. Dr. Martinez, I've read your reports, Walsh said without preamble. According to everything we know about predator evolution, what you're describing should be impossible. I thought the same thing a week ago, Rebecca replied. But the evidence is overwhelming. These creatures have integrated humans into their social structure in ways we've never seen before. As they walked toward the research station, a young Shadow Maw approached them curiously. Walsh stopped moving and observed the creature carefully. Fascinating, she murmured. Look at its body language. No aggression, no territorial displays. It's approaching us the same way a domestic animal approaches familiar humans. The Shadow Maw came within 10 feet of them, sat down, and made a soft, rumbling sound. That's Midnight, Rebecca explained. He's one of the younger ones. He seems particularly curious about new humans who arrive. Walsh knelt down slowly, keeping her movements calm and predictable. Midnight tilted his massive head and made another gentle sound. Dr. Walsh, meet me in the geology lab when you're ready, Rebecca said. I think I found something that might explain everything. An hour later, Walsh joined Rebecca in the research station's geology section. The walls were covered with charts showing rock layers, fossil records, and timeline data. What am I looking at? Walsh asked. The history of this planet, Rebecca replied. And the key to understanding why the Shadow Maws chose us. Rebecca pointed to a section of the geological timeline. About 10,000 years ago, Kepler 442c experienced a massive extinction event. Volcanic eruptions, climate change, and ecosystem collapse. Most of the medium-sized species died out completely. That would create severe pressure on apex predators, Walsh noted. With their primary prey gone, they would face starvation. Exactly, but look at this. Rebecca showed Walsh fossil evidence from the period just after the extinction. The Shadow Maws didn't die out. Instead, they developed something unprecedented. The fossils showed Shadow Maw remains alongside the bones of a smaller bipedal species. But these weren't predator-prey relationships. The bones were buried together, with signs of cooperation rather than hunting. They formed partnerships, Walsh said in amazement, with proto-intelligent beings. We found evidence of shared camps, cooperative hunting sites, and even what appears to be joint burial grounds. The Shadow Maws survived the extinction by working with the planet's primitive intelligent species. Dr. Veltar entered the lab, carrying more fossil samples. Dr. Martinez, we found additional evidence at the excavation site. Tool marks on Shadow Maw. Bones that show medical care, not butchering. Walsh examined the bones carefully. These marks indicate surgical procedures. The proto-intelligent species was providing medical care to injured Shadow Maws. And in return, the Shadow Maws provided protection and hunting assistance, Rebecca added. It was true symbiosis. Both species needed each other to survive. Michael Davis joined them, bringing his linguistic analysis equipment. Dr. Walsh, I've made a breakthrough in understanding Shadow Maw communication. Their language contains ancient, root sounds that don't match current usage patterns. Meaning? I think they still carry genetic memory of their partnership language. Some of the sounds they make when communicating about humans match phonetic patterns that would be used by bipedal species, not quadrupedal ones. Walsh sat down heavily, processing the implications. So when humans arrived, the Shadow Maws recognized us as similar to their ancient partners. Our bipedal stance, our tool use, our social cooperation, we triggered their evolutionary memory. That's my theory, Rebecca said. We remind them of the species that helped them survive their darkest period. In their genetic memory, cooperation with bipedal tool users equals survival. Emma Rodriguez entered the lab with urgent news. Doctors, we have a problem. The storm system we've been tracking has changed direction. It's heading straight for us, and it's much larger than our original projections. Through the lab windows, they could see dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The wind was already picking up, and the colony's weather sensors showed dangerous atmospheric pressure changes. How long do we have? Rebecca asked. 6 hours, maybe less. And it's not just affecting the colony. The storm path includes several Shadow Maw den sites in the hills. Captain Thompson's voice came over the communication system. All personnel to emergency stations were implementing full storm protocols. As the humans began their preparations, something remarkable happened outside. Alpha, the lead Shadow Maw, began making urgent calls across the valley. Within minutes, Shadow Maws from all over the region began converging on the colony area. They're not seeking shelter for themselves, Dr. Sarah Chen observed. They're positioning themselves to help us. The storm hit with devastating force. Winds over 100 miles per hour tore at the colony buildings, while driving rain turned the ground into mud. The humans huddled in their reinforced shelters, listening to the chaos outside. But through the storm sounds, they could hear something else. Shadow Maw calls. Michael Davis monitored the audio pickups from his shelter. They're coordinating rescue operations. I'm hearing calls about damaged buildings, trapped animals, and evacuation routes. Evacuation routes to where? Walsh asked. The Shadow Maw caves in the eastern hills. They're offering us shelter in their own dens. When the worst of the storm passed, the humans emerged to find several colony buildings damaged or destroyed. But what amazed them was seeing Shadow Maws carrying human belongings to safety, including medical supplies and food stores. They saved our essential supplies, Emma said in wonder. They knew what we needed to survive. But the cooperation didn't end there. Tom Anderson, one of the colony's engineers, noticed something during the damage assessment. Dr. Martinez, you need to see this, he called out. The Shadow Maw dens in Sector 7 were hit hard by the storm. There are cubs trapped in a collapsed tunnel. Without hesitation, several colonists grabbed rescue equipment and headed toward the damaged dens. The adult Shadow Maws watched anxiously as the humans worked to dig out their young. Careful with that support beam, Tom called to his team. The whole structure could come down. For hours, humans and Shadow Maws worked side by side. The humans provided technical expertise and tools, while the Shadow Maws used their strength to move heavy debris. When they finally reached the trapped cubs, both species celebrated together. This is unprecedented, Walsh said as she watched a Shadow Maw mother gently licking the hands of the human who had saved her cubs. Interspecies cooperation at this level suggests evolutionary bonding that goes far deeper than simple behavioral adaptation. As the cleanup continued, more evidence of the deep bond emerged. Shadow Maws brought their injured to the Human Medical Center, trusting Emma Rodriguez to treat wounds that their own natural healing couldn't handle. Meanwhile, humans who had lost their homes in the storm were invited into Shadow Maw dens, where the massive creatures shared their warmth and protection. We're not just adopted family members, Rebecca realized. We're true partners, just like the ancient proto-intelligent species was. The Shadow Maws remember in their genes what it means to have bipedal allies. Dr. Veltar, despite his initial skepticism, was now convinced. This changes everything we know about predator evolution. If genetic memory can preserve cooperative instincts for 10,000 years, it suggests that partnership behaviors can be inherited just like hunting behaviors. As night fell after the storm, something new began happening. The Shadow Maws started bringing their cubs to meet the human children. The young of both species began playing together under the watchful eyes of their parents. It's not just that. They remember the old partnership, Walsh observed. They're recreating it. The next generation of both species will grow up together. But their celebration was interrupted by an urgent alarm from the colony's deep sensors. Something far below ground had been disturbed by the storm's seismic activity. "What is it?" Rebecca asked the sensor technician. "Movement in the deep cavern systems. Lots of movement. And it's all heading toward the surface." Alpha suddenly appeared at the research station, making urgent, distressed calls. Other shadow moths began gathering, their body language showing agitation and fear. "I've never seen them act like this," Emma said. "They're terrified of something." Michael Davis quickly analyzed Alpha's vocalizations. The phonetic patterns suggest extreme danger, ancient enemy, and underground threat. "Dr. Martinez, I think." The storm woke up something that the shadow moths hoped would stay buried forever. Through the ground they could feel vibrations, something large and numerous moving through the deep tunnels beneath their feet. The shadow moths formed protective circles around all the humans, but for the first time since the partnership began, they looked genuinely afraid. "Whatever's down there," Rebecca said grimly, "it's something the shadow moths have been afraid of for thousands of years, and now it knows we're here." The evolutionary bond between humans and shadow moths had been forged in cooperation and mutual survival. Now it was about to be tested by an ancient enemy that both species would have to face together. The ground beneath New Haven Colony shook with rhythmic vibrations that grew stronger each hour. Dr. Rebecca Martinez stood in the command center, watching seismic readings that showed massive movement in the deep tunnel systems below their feet. "How deep are they?" asked Lisa Parker, the colony's administrator who had arrived just before the storm to inspect their situation. "The readings suggest they're moving through caverns nearly a mile underground," replied the sensor technician, "but they're definitely heading upward." Alpha, the lead shadow moth, had remained near the command center all night. The massive creature paced back and forth, making low, worried sounds that Michael Davis was desperately trying to translate. "He keeps using the ancient phonetic patterns," Michael said, studying his linguistic analysis. "The sounds he's making don't exist in modern shadow moth communication. It's like he's speaking a language that's been dead for thousands of years." Dr. Jennifer Walsh examined the geological data on her portable equipment. "According to these readings, whatever is down there has been dormant since the same extinction event that created the human shadow moth partnership. The storm must have opened old pathways that have been sealed for millennia." A new alarm echoed through the colony as the perimeter sensors detected something emerging from the forest. But this time, it wasn't the familiar sight of razor claws or other surface predators. "Dear God," whispered Captain Thompson as he stared at the main screen. Creatures unlike anything they had seen before were crawling out of the ground. They moved on 6 legs, each one the size of a large dog, with dark, chitinous shells that reflected the sunlight like black metal. Their heads were elongated, with multiple eyes that glowed with pale yellow light. "Tunnel crawlers," Emma Rodriguez said grimly, reading from her medical database. "I thought they were extinct." "You know what these things are?" Rebecca asked. "They're mentioned in some of the older colonial authority reports. Deep-dwelling predators that were supposedly wiped out during early terraforming operations, but these look much larger than the historical descriptions." Dr. Veltar activated his biological scanners and immediately recoiled at the readings. "These creatures are not natural predators. Their biology shows signs of hive mind behavior and adaptive evolution. They appear to be able to modify their physical structure based on environmental threats." As if to prove his point, several of the tunnel crawlers began changing before their eyes. Their shells grew thicker and darker, and new appendages emerged from their bodies. Within minutes, they had adapted to the surface environment. The shadow moths reacted with immediate alarm. Alpha let out a long, complex howl that echoed across the valley. From every direction, shadow moths began converging on the colony. But their body language was different from previous defensive actions. This time they showed genuine fear. "I count over 50 tunnel crawlers emerging from different locations," reported the sensor technician, "and more are coming up every minute." Robert Kim, the colony's chief engineer, ran into the command center carrying a modified plasma rifle. Our standard weapons aren't working against them. The energy discharges just bounce off their shells, and their biology seems to adapt to whatever we shoot at them. Lisa Parker took charge of the situation with practiced authority. All non-essential personnel to the underground shelters immediately. Engineering teams, I want you working with the Shadow Maws to identify these creatures' weaknesses. Working with the Shadow Maws? Robert asked. They've been fighting these things before, Dr. Walsh interjected. The fossil evidence shows ancient battlefields where Shadow Maws and proto-intelligent species fought together against exactly this type of creature. Alpha approached the command center and began making urgent vocalizations. Michael Davis listened carefully and then looked up with surprise. He's not just warning us about the immediate threat. He's trying to tell us about their reproduction cycle. If I'm translating correctly, these creatures multiply exponentially when they have access to biological material. Biological material? Emma asked. Any living tissue. They use it to create more of themselves. A massive explosion rocked the colony as several tunnel crawlers breached the main perimeter. The automated defense systems opened fire, but the energy weapons had no effect on the creature's adaptive armor. However, the Shadow Maws knew exactly how to fight them. The massive predators attacked with surgical precision, targeting specific joints in the creature's armor where their natural claws could penetrate. They moved in coordinated teams with some Shadow Maws herding the tunnel crawlers into positions where others could deliver killing strikes. They know the weak points, Robert realized. The Shadow Maws have genetic memory of how to fight these things. Then we need to learn from them, Lisa said decisively. Robert, watch how they attack and design weapons that can exploit the same vulnerabilities. The battle intensified as more tunnel crawlers emerged from the underground networks. But something else was happening. The creatures weren't just attacking randomly. They were learning from each encounter, adapting their tactics and armor to counter both human technology and Shadow Maw attacks. They're getting smarter, Dr. Veltar observed with alarm. Each wave of attackers shows improvements based on the previous failures. David Martinez, a security specialist who had arrived with Lisa Parker, coordinated the human defense efforts. We need to think like the ancient proto-intelligent species. If they successfully fought these creatures alongside the Shadow Maws, there must be a strategy that works. Rebecca studied the ancient fossil evidence while explosions echoed outside. The archaeological sites show evidence of underground warfare. The proto-intelligent species didn't just fight these creatures on the surface. They went into the tunnel systems. That's suicide, Robert protested. Down there, we'd be fighting on their home ground. Alpha suddenly appeared at Rebecca's side and began making a series of specific calls. Michael translated quickly. He's offering to guide us into the tunnels, but he's also warning us about something else. The tunnel crawlers have a central control node deep underground. If we don't destroy it, they'll keep adapting and multiplying until they overrun the entire surface. Amanda Foster, a demolitions expert from Lisa's team, stepped forward. If there's a central node, I can destroy it, but I'll need a way to get past their defenses and reach the target. The Shadow Maws can get you there, Emma said. But this isn't just about saving the colony anymore. According to the ancient evidence, these creatures don't stop with one location. They spread across entire continents, consuming everything in their path. Lisa Parker made the hard decision. We go underground. Combined human Shadow Maw strike teams with the goal of reaching and destroying their control center. As they prepared for the most dangerous mission any of them had ever attempted, Rebecca realized that the partnership between humans and Shadow Maws was about to be tested in the same way it had been 10,000 years ago. The ancient war was beginning again, and this time the stakes were not just survival but the future of all surface life on Kepler 442c. Alpha, Rebecca said to the massive Shadow Maw leader, we trust you to lead us into the darkness. Alpha responded, with a sound that Michael translated as acceptance of responsibility and promise of protection. The ancient alliance was ready for its greatest test. The entrance to the tunnel system was a jagged hole in the ground that seemed to breathe with malevolent life. Dr. Rebecca Martinez stood at its edge, wearing combat gear she had never expected to need as a scientist. Around her, 20 humans and 12 Shadow Maws prepared for the most dangerous mission in the colony's history. David Martinez, the security chief and Rebecca's brother, checked his modified weapons one final time. Working with engineer Robert Kim, they had developed new ammunition based on Shadowmaw hunting patterns. Projectiles designed to target the joint weak points that the massive predators instinctively knew how to find. "Remember," David said to the strike team, "we follow the Shadowmaw's lead down there. They know these tunnels from genetic memory. We're the support, not the leaders." Alpha stood at the tunnel entrance, his massive form silhouetted against the pale morning light. The lead Shadowmaw had been making complex vocalizations for the past hour, calls that echoed deep into the earth and received answers from far below. "What is he doing?" asked Amanda Foster, the demolitions expert who carried enough explosives to level a city block. Michael Davis listened to the alien conversation with growing amazement. "He's not just communicating with our Shadowmaws. There are others down there, Shadowmaws that never came to the surface that have been guarding the deep places for thousands of years." Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had insisted on joining the mission despite the danger, recorded everything with her scientific equipment. This suggests that some Shadowmaws remained in the tunnels specifically to watch for the return of these creatures. Emma Rodriguez, carrying medical supplies for both humans and Shadowmaws, pointed to movement in the tunnel depths. "Something's coming up." 3 Shadowmaws emerged from the darkness below. These were different from the surface dwellers, larger, with darker fur and scars that spoke of constant underground warfare. Their eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed adapted for the perpetual darkness of the deep tunnels. Alpha communicated with the tunnel guardians in rapid, complex exchanges. Michael translated as quickly as he could. The tunnel crawlers have been growing stronger for decades. Small numbers at first, but they've been consuming underground life forms and expanding their territory. The storm opened the final barriers that kept them trapped in the deepest levels. "How many are we facing?" Lisa Parker asked. Michael listened to more Shadowmaw communication before answering grimly. "Millions. The entire underground ecosystem has been converted into crawler biomass." David Martinez felt his heart sink, but Alpha made a reassuring sound and began descending into the tunnel. The ancient partnership was about to face its ultimate test. The descent took 2 hours through winding passages that seemed carved by flowing water eons ago. The Shadowmaws moved with confident familiarity, their night vision guiding the humans through absolute darkness broken only by their artificial lights. "The air composition is changing," Dr. Walsh noted, checking her atmospheric sensors. "Higher oxygen content, but also organic compounds I don't recognize." "Tunnel crawler pheromones," Emma said, consulting her medical database. "They use chemical signals to coordinate hive behavior. As they went deeper, the signs of ancient warfare became clear. The tunnel walls showed claw marks from long-ago battles, and scattered bones indicated where prehistoric conflicts had raged. "Look at this," Rebecca called softly, examining a section of wall covered in carved symbols. The markings were clearly made by intelligent hands, but they were old beyond measure. Michael studied them with his linguistic equipment. "These are instructions," he said in wonder, "left by the proto-intelligent species for future generations. They're telling us how to reach the hive center and what weaknesses to exploit." Alpha made urgent warning sounds. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber where thousands of tunnel crawlers moved in organized formations. The sight was terrifying, an army of adaptive predators that had been building strength for millennia. "There," Amanda pointed to the chamber's center, where a massive structure pulsed with organic light. "That has to be the control node." The hive center was a grotesque fusion of biology and architecture. Reaching from floor to ceiling of the enormous cavern, tunnel crawlers constantly moved in and out of the structure, carrying organic material and receiving new instructions. "It's beautiful in a horrible way," Dr. Walsh whispered. "A perfect example of collective intelligence architecture." David studied the tactical situation. "We'll never fight our way through that many creatures. We need a different approach," Alpha began, making strategic vocalizations to his fellow Shadowmaws. The tunnel guardians responded by spreading out to different positions around the cavern perimeter. "They're not planning a direct assault," Michael translated. "They're going to create diversions while a small team reaches the center." "Who goes to the center?" Amanda asked, knowing the answer before she heard it. The smallest, fastest team possible, David replied. Amanda with her explosives, myself for protection, and 2 Shadow Maws as guides. Emma checked her medical supplies. I'm coming too. If anyone gets injured down there, you'll need immediate treatment. Absolutely not, David protested. This isn't a discussion, Emma said firmly. The Shadow Maws trust me to care for their wounded. If I'm not there, they might hesitate to take necessary risks. Alpha made a sound that Michael translated as agreement. The ancient partnership required trust in both directions. The battle began when the Tunnel Guardian Shadow Maws launched simultaneous attacks on different sections of the Crawler army. The hive mind immediately responded, directing thousands of creatures toward the perceived threats. In the chaos, David's small team moved through the shadows toward the hive center. The 2 Shadow Maw guides, both veterans of underground warfare, knew exactly which routes to take and when to move. The structure is partially organic, Amanda observed as they reached the base of the hive center. My explosives should work, but I need to place them at specific points to ensure complete destruction. As she worked, Emma treated a wounded Shadow Maw that had been injured reaching their position. The creature's trust in her was absolute, even in the midst of battle. Movement above us, David warned, raising his modified rifle. A group of tunnel crawlers had detected their presence and was descending from the upper levels of the hive structure. But before David could fire, both Shadow Maw guides leaped into action, their massive forms intercepting the creatures with deadly precision. Charges set, Amanda announced. But we need to get clear before detonation. The retreat from the hive center was the most harrowing part of the mission. Tunnel crawlers poured from every direction, as the hive mind focused all its attention on stopping the threat to its core. Alpha appeared at the tunnel entrance, leading a group of surface Shadow Maws in a rescue charge that cleared their escape. Brute. The ancient warriors fought with desperate courage, knowing that failure meant the end of all surface life. 30 seconds to detonation, Amanda called as they reached minimum safe distance. The explosion that followed was unlike anything any of them had ever experienced. The hive center collapsed in on itself, sending shockwaves through the entire underground network. But more importantly, the organized behavior of the tunnel crawlers immediately became chaotic and confused. The hive mind is fragmenting, Dr. Walsh observed. Without central coordination, they're reverting to individual survival behavior. Individual tunnel crawlers were still dangerous, but they were no longer an organized army capable of overrunning the surface world. As the strike team made their way back to the surface, Rebecca reflected on what they had accomplished. The ancient partnership between humans and Shadow Maws had not only survived its greatest test, but had grown stronger through shared sacrifice and mutual trust. The war beneath was over, but the real work of building a new future was just beginning. 1 year after the destruction of the tunnel crawler hive, Dr. Rebecca Martinez stood on the observation deck of the newly expanded New Haven colony. The settlement had grown from a small outpost to a thriving community that served as a model for human Shadow Maw cooperation throughout the galaxy. The changes were visible everywhere. Human buildings now incorporated Shadow Maw den architecture, with large common areas where both species could gather comfortably. Agricultural fields were protected by Shadow Maw guardians who had learned to distinguish between harmful pests and beneficial insects. Children played in mixed groups, with young humans and Shadow Maw cubs growing up together as natural companions. The integration is remarkable, said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had remained on Kepler 442c to document the ongoing evolution of the partnership. We're witnessing the development of a truly symbiotic civilization. Nancy Williams, the colony's new civilian administrator, joined them on the observation deck. She had arrived 6 months ago to help establish formal protocols for human Shadow Maw cooperation, and her legal background had proven invaluable in creating the framework for interspecies governance. The Galactic Council is asking for detailed reports on how we structure decision-making, Nancy said. 17 other colonies have requested permission to establish similar partnerships with local apex predators. Rebecca smiled as she watched Alpha teaching a group of young colonists how to read Shadow Maw territorial markers. The massive creature had become something between a mayor and a grandfather to the human community, his presence a constant source of stability and wisdom. "How many successful partnerships have been established so far?" Rebecca asked. 12 confirmed, Nancy replied, though each one is unique. The predators on Titan Colony are more feline in nature, while the ones on New Edinburgh seem to be descended from pack hunters similar to earth wolves. Dr. Sarah Chen approached them, carrying her latest research data. She had become the colony's expert on interspecies child development, studying how human children and shadow maw cubs influenced each other's growth patterns. "The psychological results are fascinating," Sarah reported. "Human children raised alongside shadow maw cubs show enhanced spatial reasoning, improved threat assessment skills, and remarkable advances in nonverbal communication." "And the shadow maw cubs?" Walsh asked. "They're developing tool-use behaviors we've never seen in wild populations. They watch human children solve problems and then adapt those solutions to their own needs." Their conversation was interrupted by excited shouts from the colony's central plaza. Rebecca and her colleagues hurried to see what was happening. In the plaza, a crowd had gathered around Emma Rodriguez, who was providing medical care to an injured trader who had just arrived from another system. But what made the scene remarkable was that 3 shadow maws were assisting her, holding medical equipment and providing gentle restraint for the patient. "Dr. Rodriguez has trained them as medical assistants," Nancy explained. "They can detect internal injuries that our scanners miss, and their strength allows them to provide stabilization that would require mechanical equipment." Michael Davis appeared at Rebecca's side, his linguistic equipment beeping with activity. "Dr. Martinez, you need to hear this. I've been monitoring communications between shadow maw communities across the planet, and something significant is happening." "What kind of something?" "They're developing new language structures specifically for communicating with humans, not just adapting their existing vocalizations but creating entirely new phonetic combinations that both species can understand." He played back a recording of recent shadow maw communications. The sounds were clearly different from anything they had heard before, more complex with tonal variations that seemed designed to bridge the gap between species. "It's a true hybrid language," Michael continued, "and human children are learning it naturally, just like they learn any native language." Robert Kim, the chief engineer, joined their group with news of his own developments. "The Colonial Authority has approved our proposal for the Interspecies Technology Initiative. We're going to share our cooperative defense systems with every colony that requests them." "Defense systems?" Rebecca asked. "Combined human predator security protocols," Robert explained. "Early warning networks that use predator senses enhanced by human technology, defensive strategies that coordinate human weapons with natural predator abilities, and construction techniques that accommodate both species' needs." As they talked, Chris Taylor, one of the colony's youngest residents, ran past chasing a shadow maw cub in an elaborate game of tag. Both child and cub moved with perfect coordination, understanding each other's movements and intentions without any verbal communication. "That's the future right there," Walsh observed. "A generation that sees interspecies cooperation as completely normal." Lisa Parker approached them with an official communication device. "Dr. Martinez, incoming priority message from the Galactic Research Council." Rebecca accepted the communication and listened to the recorded message. Her expression changed, from curiosity to amazement as she heard the contents. "What is it?" Nancy asked. "The Council is establishing a new branch of xenobiology specifically focused on interspecies cooperation. They want me to head the program." Rebecca paused, processing the implications. "They're calling it the Martinez Institute for Symbiotic Evolution." "Congratulations," Walsh said warmly, "though I assume you'll be staying here to continue the research." "Actually, the position involves traveling to different worlds to help establish new partnerships, but Kepler 442c will remain the primary research center." Emma Rodriguez finished treating her patient and joined their conversation. "Dr. Martinez, I've been meaning to tell you about the latest medical developments. We've discovered that human shadow maw medical cooperation has unexpected benefits for both species, such as shadow maw saliva contains compounds that accelerate human healing, not enough to be dangerous but sufficient to improve recovery times by 30%, and human medical techniques have helped us develop treatments for shadow maw, genetic conditions that have plagued them for generations. Tom Anderson, now the colony's head of construction, arrived with blueprints for the next phase of development. Dr. Martinez, we're ready to begin construction of the interspecies university. Classes will be taught by both human and Shadow Maw instructors, with students from multiple colonies. Rebecca looked around at the thriving community that had grown from a simple research mission. The partnership between humans and Shadow Maws had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a true merger of different species working toward common goals. There's something else, Nancy said quietly. The tunnel crawler situation has had an unexpected outcome. How so? Without the hive mind controlling them, individual crawlers have begun showing signs of independent intelligence. Some communities are reporting that lone crawlers are attempting to communicate rather than attack. You think they might be capable of joining the partnership? It's possible. If we can find a way to help them break free of their hive conditioning completely, we might be able to integrate them as well. As the sun set over New Haven Colony, Rebecca reflected on how far they had come. What had started as a scientific mystery had become a revolution in interspecies relations that was spreading across the galaxy. Alpha approached their group and made a complex vocalization that Michael translated immediately. He says, "The ancient partnership has been reborn, but it's stronger now because it includes choice and understanding rather than just survival necessity." Dr. Veltar, who had remained on the planet to study the ongoing developments, added his own perspective. From a scientific standpoint, we're observing the emergence of a new form of evolution, not biological, but social and cultural evolution that crosses species boundaries. Amanda Foster, now the head of colony security, brought them the evening threat assessment. All clear as usual. The Shadow Maw perimeter patrols report no hostile activity, and the individual crawler encounters remain peaceful. As night fell, the bioluminescent plants that the Shadow Maws had helped humans cultivate began to glow softly, creating a natural lighting system that both species found beautiful and practical. "Dr. Martinez," Chris Taylor called out as he approached, with his Shadow Maw companion, a young female they called Star. "Star wants to know if you'll teach her how to use the laboratory equipment tomorrow." Rebecca knelt down to Star's level and made the gentle rumbling sound that meant agreement in the hybrid language. The young Shadow Maw responded with what could only be described as a pleased purr. "Of course," Rebecca said in both human speech and Shadow Maw vocalizations. "We have a lot to learn from each other." As she watched Star and Chris run off together, followed protectively by both human and Shadow Maw adults, Rebecca realized that they hadn't just solved the mystery of why apex predators chose humans as guardians. They had discovered the future of civilization itself, a future where cooperation between species wasn't just possible, but inevitable. The partnership that had begun in ancient necessity had evolved into something beautiful, complex, and full of unlimited potential.